Welcome back to Conversation from the Hearth. Today I'm joined by Professor Buitron from Buitron Academy. He has an awesome podcast called Gloves Off with Professor Buitron, and we're so excited to have him with us today. This is actually our second meeting because unfortunately I kind of fubbed things on our first recording, but I'm excited to rehash this with him. A lot of great details came up in our last conversation. So, Professor Buitron, welcome to the show. How are you doing, sir?
Doing well. How are you doing today? How's your audience doing? Hope everybody's doing good.
I'm doing good. We have our tournament coming up here on September 13th, which we're really excited about. And we're just kind of getting prepared for that. We have our preparatory workshop this weekend. Next weekend, we have our judges meeting. And so we're kind of full steam ahead for that. And we have some seminars coming up after that at our academy. So a lot of cool things going on. How are things for you?
Everything's fine on this end. We're kind of growing. It's a new season of Savate. Savate's a seasonal or a collegiate season. So we're restarting the season now, the 25-26 season. And we'll take it from there. We got a lot of great stuff coming up in November. As I was telling you before, under USA Savate, we have the 18th annual World Pugilist Hall of Fame. This is where we embrace other individuals that have gone along the world of what I call the lonely man's art, because the friends that you get are the ones you get in the training hall. You kind of lose everybody else on the outside,
Sure.
and this goes through all the different martial arts. And this will be our 18th year, and we have several individuals from representing a lot of different arts here in the States and abroad, and it's a 2 day event. On Saturday, we have workshops for anybody that wants to come in. And on Sunday, we have the awards dinner, and it's actually like a banquet because it's at noon, and it's very fun. We have demonstrations from everybody, and people enjoy it. There's a lot of fellowship that gets developed here during this, and we've had people from the Philippines, Malaysia, India, Brazil, Mexico, Canada, England, France, Ireland,
Wow.
across the U.S. throughout the years, and everybody's always been very, very amicable, and it's just a great event.
Sounds like it. Sounds awesome.
Yes, it's
So
awesome. And hopefully, you guys can come.
yeah, we would love to. Just send me all the info on it, and we'd love to be there.
We'll love,
Um,
we'll love to have you.
so last time we met, I got to learn a little bit about your background and how you got started in Savate. Can you tell me again, for our viewers, how the story began and where you're at today?
Sure. I was 6 years old, and we had just moved back to Laredo, Texas. A lot of people would say, "How can you get Savate or into Laredo, Texas?" Well, my family's Basque on the Buitron side. But my father was studying, my father was a physician. So when we moved back, I went to go play in the playground in the apartments that we were living in. Little behold, I got my rear end handed to me by about six kids, just beat the shit out of me. The
Hmm.
next day, I get home and my dad looks at me, and you could have put any saint or martyr. That's the way I walked in, with blood all over the place. And the next day I found myself in front of my uncle, and he started teaching me how to fight. And that's how long I've been doing it. So I started at the age of 6, and this September I'll be 57. So I'll be doing it for 51 years. My uncle used to say, "Cipota is for the street and boxing's for the ring." So I grew up with that. We grew up in other different towns, and every time my father was in a different town, he'll stick me in the martial art club that was there. So I got very much involved with back then it was Mudu Kwan, uh,
Oh yeah, I moved on.
and then it was Tang Sudo as well, and
Hmm.
back to Laredo, and I went back to my uncle, go learn with my uncle. In high school, I had gotten into an entanglement in the hallway, and a biology teacher said, "Hey, where did you learn how to fight?" And I said, "Well, my uncle taught me," and he goes, "I'm starting my karate team, but I just want to have a fighting team, a competition team. Can I talk to your father? So he came over and we competed. And
Mm,
but I still trained with my uncle and I trained with the competition team and just that's what we went through. I graduated at 16 and I left. I left to Dallas and I was in the university in Dallas and I met a lot of great martial artists. At that time frame, that's when I first heard of the word Savate.
mm,
When I graduated, a cousin of mine who had been in the Vietnam conflict, he stayed back in Hawaii and he would always come visit us and he would always train with my uncle and many others train with him. And he used to say, what uncle's teaching you is Savate. So when you go off to college, look for it. Well, there was no Savate anywhere. So I was in Dallas. I was like a kid in the candy store. I started learning Shaolin Kung Fu,
mm,
and then I did some Aikijitsu. And in Aikijitsu, I met a man that had grown up with Chow and Emperado and Parker. His name was Keith C. So I got involved with Kempo. So Kempo, you can say, is my second love.
mm,
And by me meeting with all those individuals, we would spar different people, right? And I would always kick them in the legs. In the 80s, nobody would kick to the legs. It was taboo to kick to the legs.
mm,
Muay Thai was just coming of age.
mhm,
Okay, so nobody would say, it would tell you, hey, you can't do that. Well, that's what I learned how to do, and I can do it. And so the kicks of Sipota are very much similar, the patterns and the kicks and so on and so forth. But you wouldn't kick to the face. The highest you would kick was, to the kidney, to the liver, and stuff like that, to the legs, and so there was a lot of kicking of that nature. The hands were just similar to boxing,
mhm,
and people would say, "How did you learn? What did you learn?" So that's how it started. So I ended up teaching at a very young age, at the age of 16. I mean, at the age of 16, at the age of 18. That's when I basically started teaching. 2 years in Dallas,
mhm,
meeting all these individuals. So, well, Savat was growing. My cousin came back from Hawaii. It was a Christmas, and he said, "Hey, I have a friend in San Antonio that trained with a French guy in California." I said, "Really?" And he wants to meet us, so we went over there. And big guy, his name was Perry King, rough and tumble guy, and he must have been if he was if I was 17 at that time. Okay, 16, 17 at that time, seven, and we met Perry. Um, Perry must have been in his 30s, just like my cousin was in his 30s, right? They were in the Marines together. And we put on the gloves and, he just came over just smacking everything away. And I said to myself, well, if that's the way it's going to be, well, that's the way it's going to be. We have to move forward. So one thing led up to another. And he kind of said, oh, you can't hit me that hard. And I go, well, that's how you're hitting me. If you're going to hit me, I'm going to hit you. And that's just the way it's going to be. So we kind of became friends. So he went back and he said, there's another French guy in over there that does another martial art, which is Jeet Kune Do. He's trying to revive Savat. So we all got together. His name was Salim, and he went to France, and he comes back, and he got very good friends with my father. And he tells my father, there's a French Federation. So my father, and the French Federation, they all talked. So they sent a team over here to kind of teach everybody.
mhm,
And it went to California, then the team went to California, the team came to Texas, and that's how it started the movement.
mhm,
When I was 19, graduating, I actually graduated when 20. When I was 19, one of the professors that I came down would always come down. His name was Robert Patorel. He says, "You need to go to France," and I was like, "Yeah, yeah. How am I going to go to France?"
mm.
So at the age of 20, I ended up with a full scholarship to go
Wow.
study. So I left. So I lived in France. I went to school in France. I fought in France. I had a club of Savate in France. Um, when I left, little did I know, and I hate to pat myself in the back or do something like that, but I'll say it straight because it's the truth. When I came back, I found out that I was the first American to ever receive the Silver Glove in France. became the first American to ever become a professor of the disciplines in France.
Wow.
The first non-French to have a club of Savate in the history of Savate in France. So a lot of things like that occurred. But Savate was still moving here in Texas. It was moving here in Laredo and in San Antonio. It was still growing. So in actually in 89, 90, 89, 90, around that time frame, the Texas Association of Savate was formed.
Mm.
And in 91, it was passed along the educational department of Texas. So we could have leagues or inside schools and stuff like that, right?
Mhm.
They never got into fulfillment. Everything's just planned out. So we started having competitions. I had a school in Dallas. The school in Laredo was here. The school in San Antonio was here. And in Dallas, we produced a lot of little clubs around. So there was a lot of clubs for a while all over the Metroplex. Within that time frame, we started having bouts. Okay, 92, 93, 94, 95. And one of the bouts, after the fight, this gentleman comes up and we became good friends. And he goes, "Hi, this is great, man. Who's the association? Who's heading it?" And I go, "It's the Texas Association of Savate." "Really? We don't know about it." He goes, "My name's Dickie Cole. I'm the head boxing commissioner here, and you guys did great. And I go, "Good, this and that." And he goes, "We need to form a nonprofit for the Department of License and Regulation to accept it, for it to become legal." We didn't know what we were doing at the time, right?
Mm.
So all of a sudden, in '96, USA Savate is developed.
Mm.
It took us several 97, 98, until it was fully absorbed, not only by the Internal Revenue Service, federally, state, and the Boxing Commission, the Department of License Regulation, to accept it. So we started having, again, Texas championships, U.S. championships. We had international championships, and it grew. And but what killed Savate after World War II was that the wars happened.
Mm.
So it started growing from '96 to 2001. There was 33 different clubs in Texas alone of Savate.
Wow.
A lot of them were associated inside, like Killeen and Hood and the different air bases that were around, and naval bases that had clubs. They had a lot of guys in the young age, and when I say young age, is from 18 to 26, that were competing. Well, guess what happened in 9/11? We entered a war,
Mhm.
and all of it dissipated a whole generation.
Mhm.
So now, it's still alive and kicking and moving, but the sport of it, the kickboxing sport, which is known as Savate Box and Cess, we'll get a little bit involved inside the origins. It died.
Mm.
Okay, Texas is still the only state that allows Savate to be partaken as a as a sport. No other state is allowed. We're
Mm.
trying to get other states to accept it, but it's very, very hard to do so.
Okay.
And especially when you don't have no membership, they're going to say, "Who are you going to compete against?" Right?
Yeah.
So it's a little bit different.
Wow. So you were like a real pioneer for Savate in America. That is a tremendous responsibility, but also like an amazing opportunity. What was it like going over to France and training over there?
It was different. You earned your respect and how you acted inside the ring, inside the schools, and so on and so forth. And that's how the respect you got. How can I put it? Savate kind of slices between a martial arts school, like a Japanese Korean martial arts school kind of way, and a boxing school. It kind of slices right down that middle.
Mm.
Yes, there's still traditions involved. Yes, there's still a lot of respect and how can I say? I wouldn't say protocol, but now we'll try to use that word, right? Savate has a brigade system that a lot of people don't know. It's unlike karate. In many karate schools, a person gets a black belt and goes up a school two blocks down from where he started, and all of a sudden the next year he's self promoting himself. So that's a little bit different. Savate, you have technical grades, you have instructional grades, teachers' grades. Then you have competition grades. And not only do you have competition grades in Savate Books Françaises, you also have um, technical grades in Lacan de Combat and competition grades in Lacan de Combat, and then so on and so forth. And a lot of people say, oh, I can teach whatever I want. Yeah, probably so if you know what you're doing, right? But they say, oh, Savate has wrestling. Yes, it does have a grappling art, not wrestling art. It has a grappling art known as lutte parisienne. But when I was there and I was living the life, I'm still living it now, right? You had to be a professor of both Savate and Lacan for you to be accepted to go learn lutte parisienne. Not everybody was taught lutte parisienne. Understand? And once you learned lutte parisienne, then you were accepted to go learn panache, which I did, became a professor of panache under Roger Lafon, who has passed away now. So when people look at the whole art and say, oh, I knew this, they're kind of being a fable, kind of lying. You don't, it hasn't been. What occurred in 92, 93, a huge push for the sport in France and in Europe came of age. So if you were teaching Savate as a martial art, as a self-defense for the street, urban combative system, it was kind of frowned upon. So in 94, we received the letter, all professors received the letter, and there were not that many professors then in comparison to there is now. Then there might have been maybe 60, 70 professors worldwide. Now we're in probably 40 to 48 left. Understand? A lot of them have passed away. But we'll get into those things now. When everybody got a letter saying you couldn't teach it as a self-defense. Well, here in the States, people want to learn how to defend yourself in the street. They could care less about a sport. They already have so many sports.
Yeah.
There's no way you're going to compete against football, basketball, and so on. So people aren't going to come do that for that. They're going to come learn a martial art because they want to defend themselves in the street, quote unquote, right? Many of those martial artists that start training might like it and would like to compete in the element that they're training in, but it's very, very few. In the United States right now, not even 2% of the population does martial arts. So it's basically about 1 point something, right? So when you look at the masses that do martial arts, USA Boxing has 2 million registered members. Taekwondo, if you get everybody together, probably has more, right? But Savate, if you look at the records of how many in Savate, what, maybe 16? That's the whole United States. Understand what I'm saying? So it's a very, very rare, it's a rare art and the rarity to keep it preserved. That's basically what it is. And most people don't join Savate to go in the ring. They join Savate to learn how to defend themselves. Okay? So we'll touch base on that. But getting back to what it is, we got a letter. And everybody got together, my professor Patorel, Dominic Dacla, Viviani, Pierre Shang, we all got together and said, hey, what's going on here? Silvani was still alive. How can this be? So they revived what Savate was, the technical directors and the technical brigade of Savate. I'm going to tell you why. Savate, we're going to history and then we'll come back to what I'm talking here. Savate, the first mentionings of the word Savate are in a book in the 14th century. A nobleman from France, not from France, a nobleman from a baron actually from Scotland, sent his kids to learn the noble art of French foot fighting. But they spelled it with a double T, Savatte. Okay. Then you hear it in poems and you hear it in stories and you hear it in some fables of bandits and this about that, right? Then around 1803, a man by the name of Michel Cassou was his last name. His nickname was Pissu. Pissu means pissed off or don't piss him off or something to that element. Okay. He was a young guy, actually, that some of them they say that he was from the Pyrenees, and he was in the shipyards, and he went to Marseille. Then from Marseille, he ended up in the Seine River in Paris, and blah blah blah. Well, he was the bodyguard to the Duke d'Orleans. Okay, and the Duke d'Orleans is what New Orleans is named after. Okay, but the Duke, so he started teaching Savate to pupils. Somewhere in the 20s, a lot of individuals, especially nobility, aristocrats, kind of that nature, kind of soldiers, that kind of ruffian, started going to his school. During the 20s, he had two brothers, Hubert Lecour and Charles Lecour. There was another individual by the name of Hubert Lebrochure, okay, who was his actual protege of Cassou, okay. But Charles Lecour was a fighter. Back then, fighting, you fought back alleys for money and stuff to that nature, okay. So the Duke d'Orleans and Lord Seymour from England got their best fighters together. In London, there was a man by the name of Owen Swift. So they paired them up. We're going to have a fight. So in Paris, they had a fight. And this was for money, you know? And so the story goes, as told to me by Count Baruzzi and reinforced by Lafont, was that Owen Swift breaks Lecour's nose. But Lecour beats him with the kicks and so on and so forth. That's how tough he was, yeah? Beats him, knocks him down. The other guy couldn't get up. After the fight, he tells him, I want you to teach me how to punch. Mm. So Charles Lecour travels to London to learn boxing. 3 years later, comes back, and he names his art Adresse Parisienne from Paris. Okay. But Hubert Lecour had a lot of, how can I say, the noble, not nobles, but the elite, the jet setters of that time frame were his students. People like Victor Hugo, Alexander Dumas, who was the writer of the Three Musketeers. They all did it. They all did Savate. Théophile de Gautier, who did a lot of poems, and he also was a writer in the Paris newspaper. And he depicted that all the clique, all the cliche, all the fad in France is that now the Adresse Parisienne is known as boxe française. So all of a sudden, Adresse Parisienne is known as boxe française, French boxing. Mm-hmm. So you have Savate and you have boxe française. And they start traveling in two different lines. Okay? Boxe française ends up going into the police and ends up going into the military. So much so that in the book, there's writings about this, that General Jappy wrote about it, and he said that in Peking, the aristocrats were putting their children to learn boxe française because it was more violent than the dancing fights that they had. This is written. Mm. And he traveled, so by the 50s, 1850s, so, not Savate, boxe française, because of the military bases that they had already traveled the world. You had boxe française clubs in Mexico City, military base. They were teaching boxe française at the naval academies here. Mm-hmm. They were teaching boxe française in Russia. The Japanese had it. Mm-hmm. The Chinese had it. All throughout French Indochina, they had it. So boxe française kind of emerged, but a lot of people will still call it savate. Okay. So as time progresses, the riff gets bigger and bigger. Okay. As some of the greats, some of the students of Charles Lecour, he had three down. The son of one of them, his name, he was Joseph Charlemont, but his son Charles Charlemont is kind of given as the patron of how it kind of the Victorian age started with. Everybody gives him a little bit more credit, but there was a lot of professors around in that time frame. Okay, those. Let me put it to you this way: pre-World War One, there was 11 million doing savate and boxe française registered. Right now, in France alone, there's probably about 170,000, not even 200,000 doing it. That's how bad it is. But yet, in the 90s, it was close to 1 million. So they've lost. Okay, but that's a different story. So now what we're dealing with was you started getting a huge populace of people doing boxe française. It became very, very popular. That they would degrade savate. They used to have some terms, jeu haute and jeu bas, high game, low game. A lot of people say, oh, it's because you kicked high in the high game, you kicked low in the low game. No, it's a social class. The jeu haute, boxe française, you did it because the high society did it. The jeu bas, the lower class, the laymen's, the ruffians, the guys from the street, trained savate in the schools that were still in existence in savate. Understand?
Mhm.
So you had a lot of like UFC, a lot of what's better, is savate better than wrestling, is savate better than boxing, and is boxing says better than this, so they started winning. Okay. Well, lo and behold, let's speed up the process. The two world wars come into play. After World War II, there were 33 players left. Okay. So Count Baruzzi and Lafon revive. One revives the Boxe Française Association, and Lafon, coming from Savate, revives the Savate Federation. They start pushing, building. People say, well, but they look the same. Yeah, everything, if you showed me a picture, there's a kick, and you said it's a roundhouse. Well, it's not a roundhouse. It's a fuete. Fuete is what we use in Savate. It's different, but as soon as you take a still photo, it looks the same because the photograph's there, but the momentum and the positioning and how you pivot and everything is totally different things. But in Savate and Boxe Française, there is differences. There were different kicks, different punches, different ways to move, different ways to step, different ways to feint. There was a lot of things going on. Okay? But they kind of had the same ranking. Silver glove was the technical level that everybody wanted to attain. And before that, it was blue, white, red was the color of the gloves.
Mm.
Somewhere in the line, they placed a yellow glove in Boxe Française, and somewhere along the line in Savate, they placed a green glove. But in 1978, both federations merged. Okay, and a new sport was developed. Beforehand, you had Savate as a sport and Boxe Française as a sport, and both had their ring techniques and they both had their street techniques, and it was different. Okay, but in 78 they merged.
Okay.
And they produced what you see now in the competition, which is known as Savate Boxe Française.
So how
Okay,
does your lineage tie into all of this?
my lineage is Savate.
Is Savate. So it
Yeah,
comes in after this merger.
well, I have professors that were Boxe Française. I have to, right? But my lineage is Savate. My professor Paturel is Savate, Richard Sila is Savate, Roger Lafon is Savate. My Jean-Paul Viviani, my professor Jean-Paul Viviani, Michel Gilbert are Boxe Française.
Okay.
But more professors. My lineage is Savate.
Sure.
Talking about, here's a true story. In '78, when they brought the best of the best to compete against each other,
Mm.
my professor Richard Sila, he was my trainer. Okay, he was also silver glove under Paturel. He was like my brother because we're under Paturel, but he was also my trainer in Incept. Okay, when we fought, and Richard tells me that he's watching this fight, this competition, and you have Manuel Sesima, who was Savat, fight against Patrick Augais, which is Box Frances, who's the one that started the great club of Clichy, which is still open today to this point. And they will get diplomas, okay, the champion.
Okay.
So they're already putting it down, champion, and they put Alex Augais was right from Box Frances. They had started Ale, and at the time they couldn't even put the Alex. It was AL kind of an E, and then they scribble it because Assessima gave him a jab cross uppercut that knocked out Augais.
Mm.
So one. So the war, as Sheila started right then and there.
Mm.
I didn't. I noticed it there, and you can notice the subtleties. So when you came from a Box Frances club, they would say, "What do you do? This is a Box Frances Savat club."
Mm.
When you came from a Savat club, they'll say it's a Savat Box Frances club.
Mm.
Okay? So you would see those little subtleties.
Yeah.
Right now, right now in the Federation, as we stand, and with this, there is no longer a pure Savat professor left. The last pure Savat professor that was in the French Federation was Bertrand Le Provost from Club Bobigny, and he retired. So right now, everybody's a Box Frances Savat professor.
Okay.
There's no more, and Box Frances professors.
So
So
because this is such a, I wouldn't say obscure, but like a smaller discipline, you must have to serve kind of two roles, both as a martial artist and kind of as a lore keeper and historian, because this seems like you have a pretty good understanding of the history of this art.
well, you have to. You know what gets me is when you go to a school and they have a Chinese gate
Mm.
with a Korean flag with a samurai sword running across it with a praying mantis on top, and you're like, United Nations
Uh-huh.
know their history.
Sure.
Great, vast martial art individuals that we have don't know who their teacher's teacher was,
Hmm.
yet alone how it got there.
Hmm.
Some of these, some of these, some of these schools that are around, if they would research their own history, they'll find out that so and so learned it in Japan after the war and brought it here and started this, and they have a beautiful history, and they're just picking stuff off whatever they want, from Power Rangers to Justice League to Kung Fu the program, and they'll make up their own stuff and they just run with it. You have to know your history. It's a must.
Well, I think it adds an extra richness to your program that you can share with your students and get some jazzed up about it. And I think it's important to keep that lore alive, especially for a discipline like yours, which is, you know, a little bit smaller, and you're one of the people that are going to be bringing that legacy forward. It's important to remember. It's kind of like the Native Americans. If you're in a small tribe, it's important to know your history because you might be the only person that can share it. So I wanted to go back to something you said before. You were talking about it sounded like the ranking system with boxing gloves. Is that currently the ranking system that is still in Savant?
Yes, the current ranking system technically is start off with blue. You start off with nothing. You test for blue,
Okay.
green, red, black, white, yellow, silver, and there's 3 levels of technical silver glove. Third level. I'm a third degree technical silver glove.
Okay.
At one time, we were 9. I think right now we're 7 because 2 of us passed away.
Okay.
Okay. Now, you also have competition level silver glove. I'm a bronze glove.
Mm.
That's the first one because even though I fought 18 times. So you have bronze, and you get that if you want the majority of your first 10 bouts, which I did. Then it's GAC competition. GAC is Gaunt, glove, argent, silver competition. So the first silver glove competition is at 21 and 25 fights. Then it's at 50. Then it's at 75. Then it's at 100. Then it's over 125. You get a fifth degree competition silver glove. And there's a lot because they can compete all the time.
Yeah.
Some of these guys started competing when they were 8. It's kind of like, let me put it to you this way. It's kind of like going to the ring and you've been doing this is what happens with the competitions. That's why I frown about what the French have done. It's kind of like we're in boxing. We have Shane Mosley,
Mm.
national team. What's his name? De La Hoya, national team, because they were both in the same national team. One was a different weight class than the other.
Mm-hmm.
Roy Jones, who was in the same team, was a cruiser.
Mm-hmm.
And they fight these guys. They go that the Federation of Boxing Association. I'm just giving an example. This didn't happen here, but it happens in some. And they go do a seminar in some country, and they say, "Okay, bring me your boxers, and you're going to fight against a team. Would be great." And you send your people that have been doing this 6 months, maybe a year, and you compete against a person that has 80, 90, 100, 150 boxing bouts underneath. Who do you think's going to win? Huh? Understand? And that's what's happened over there. I'm going to tell you a story,
So,
true story.
okay, go ahead.
The first time Savate entered Japan, or Boxe Française entered Japan, not Savate. Savate probably with the sailors and stuff like that. We'll talk about that. But Boxe Française was in 1907. I have a postcard. I have a picture. Legrand, who was a Boxe Française player, who was a corporal in the army, was teaching the Japanese military. In that picture, they say Fonikoshi was in the middle in 1907. And they're standing and they have their hands back and they're doing this because back then that's the way Boxe Française was. It was an exercise military for fitness.
Mm-hmm.
Then they taught you the combative essence, and then they taught you a way for fitness.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm not okay. So there was some cross training there. Next time Savate kind of makes of an importance is in 1968. A dear friend of mine, and also a student under Roger Lafon, but he was a lot older than I, but he passed away. His name was Christian Guillaume, great professor. Christian Guillaume was a legionnaire. Christian Guillaume was challenged by both the Thai fighters and the Japanese fighters. That Savate was like dancing, it was no good. So he fights in Japan and knocks him out. Okay? That was 68. In 1984, 84, there was some professors that one of them, great guy, had married a Japanese girl and moved to Japan and started producing movements over there. And they were going back and forth to Paris. Okay. So they had a Savate, France, Japan fight. They told the Japanese, bring your best, karate, kickboxers, whatever. We're going to fight.
Mm.
So Japan did just that. They sent all their best to compete. Okay. They televised it all over Tokyo. Every single Japanese competitor that went in the ring was knocked out. One of them was knocked out in the third round. Why? Because in the first round, he was fighting Gilles Ledwigo, friend of mine, box francais instructor. And the guy did a switch kick that they do in Thai boxing because he was a kickboxer. And he put his arms up this way, and that round kick hit him here and broke both his ulnas. Took him. So in the rest round, they taped his arms together to here, put tape, and he fought with his hands up, and he knocks out the Japanese.
Wow.
Okay, so what happened with everybody watching Savate in Japan? Savate never again formed, or Box Francaise formed clubs until recently. But a lot of those clubs that were training ended up becoming shoot boxing clubs, Pancratius, all the other clubs that went on. Understand?
I hear what you're saying.
So so that's like shoot boxing and shoot wrestling. They took those things, elements from Box Francaise Savate, and they went off and did their own. They
Mm.
didn't promote Savate Box Francaise anymore. So when you have that type of element in competition, it really doesn't promote it,
Mm-hmm.
right? It kind of takes away from it. So you're either training and you're competing on the level, or don't do it at all.
Mm-hmm.
It's like if we take our basketball team and we get the best basketball player, and we tell a high school in Russia, come on over because you're going to fight, you're going to do the world championship basketball, or even the pros. What happens? We annihilate them.
Uh-huh.
Okay, the same thing occurs there. And to me, it's sport wise, I frown on that. Even though I love Savate and Box Francaise, it's the art that I love. I frown on what they've done because of that.
Yeah, you got to be careful with over sportifying things, that's for sure. Um, I know that personally with my own native discipline of Taekwondo, it's gone from more focused on self-defense to more focused on sport, which is unfortunate. But we're keeping it alive here at Rise Mixed Martial Arts. Um, we're getting a little bit low on time, so I wanted to get to some of these pictures that I just downloaded off of the Wikipedia page. And I know this is not always the best source of information, but I thought this might be a stimulating place for us to begin our conversation. Um, we had this first picture here, and you were telling me that this is actually not Savate because they don't have the proper footwear. And I think that's one of the most interesting things about Savate is the shoes that they wear. Um,
Right.
if I can skip ahead here, this is a
That's
picture of the shoe, correct?
correct.
Can you tell
You know,
us a little bit about this shoe and how it's used?
sure. Number one, Savate means shoe in Old French.
Okay.
Okay. Doesn't mean sabotage, doesn't mean anything else. It's shoe. Now it's chasseur. And that is a Savate shoe that as Asics used to make them. I don't know if they're making them back now, but it's I tell people that want to practice Savate here in the States, if you can't find wrestling shoes, just get your old Converse shoes. Because kicking with shoes and kicking without shoes are totally two different disciplines.
Hmm.
There's totally mechanics are different.
Mm.
The shoe in Savate or and is used as a weapon. How you pivot, how it is, it's kind of like this. A lot of arts will kick you, boom, and want to blast you away, right? Here, it's kind of like, boom, it hits you, and I'm gonna crush you probably about that in the little square. And that's what I
Hmm.
want to damage. So if I hit you in the liver, I'm gonna drop you. If I hit you in the solar plexus, I'm gonna drop you. If I hit you in the kidney, believe me, you're gonna drop. If I
Hmm.
hit you in the femoral artery area, You're
Mm-hmm.
going to go down.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it's not a how hard can I impact to shoot you across the thing, across the 5 feet away.
Yeah.
Why? Because if I'm fighting in the street against you and I want to kick you and I'm going to kick you back 6 feet for you to recover and get mad and come back to me again, I don't think it's a good idea. I want to hit you enough so I can bring you down for me to keep on kicking you.
Yeah.
So it's a different philosophy.
Well, I think that's really cool. I think it's very practical to kick and even just do footwork with shoes on because it's a very different beast. I'm reminded of the experiences I've had training outdoors or on concrete with shoes on, and it is very different. We have a retreat in Vermont every year, and I think everyone's always excited to get up there and do the training in the forest, but when they're actually out there in the grassy fields or climbing up the rocks and trying to spar and fight in that really craggy environment, it opens their eyes. Wow, this is really different than a nice mat where you can kind of slide. If you don't have your shoe on, you can do a lot of different kind of pivoting than you can actually do with the shoe. So I think this is kind of cool.
A lot of things that happen in reality, you get a lot of guys that are good kicking barefooted
Hmm.
and cowboy boots, or they're wearing dress shoes, and all of a sudden they get into an altercation on a dance floor or in a parking lot, and they find themselves in the ground because their shoes gonna get slipped on their way from you. It
Yeah.
happens so many times.
Absolutely. And in MMA, people don't kick with their feet as much, but if I had a shoe on, I would totally kick with my feet. So that's more practical, honestly. In a self-defense situation, you're probably gonna have your shoes on, let's be honest.
Absolutely
Um,
right.
yeah. Okay, let's take a look at another picture. Let's go back to I wanted to wait.
That's a now the other one.
I know I'm skipping around here. Okay, yeah, let's take a look at this one. So this is an interesting kick. In some of my preliminary research, they said that this was kind of a unique Savate kick. Can you tell us a little bit about this move?
Those kicks, they're known as man al sol, which is my hand on the ground.
Okay.
Remember, we were talking in the 1800s. There was a lot of different fighting arts, and there was a fighting art in the 1800s known as chasson, Chausson, chasson.
Mm.
Chasson was a women's art. They always say Savate, the sailors had Savate. No, the sailors had chasson. This is a chasson picture. So they'll put their hands on the ground to kick you upward. Why? Because the boat is rocking.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people don't understand that kicking on just go out to any fishing boat and try kicking, see what's going to happen to you.
Sure.
And understand. So that's why they put their hands on the
Stability.
ground because of stability. Exactly right. And there's another one that you showed me. Click.
Yeah, let's see. Was it is this one
No,
here?
that picture right there is a picture of a diploma, an actual diploma that they would give in the 1830s. That
Okay.
right there. And that depicts a picture of what they would know as chasson in boxe française. And they
Okay.
used to give in the Navy, this is what you practice. If you were a soldier, you practice boxe française. Okay, so it was what happened to chasson. The last school of chasson merged into boxe française right after World War One. So chasson disappeared in World War One. I have a theory of this. In the French colonies of Martinique,
Hmm.
Guadeloupe, which is French, and the Reunion, you have fighting systems that use kicks like that. In the Reunion, it's known as damier or moreng. In Martinique, it's known as damier, and in Guadeloupe, it's known as laja. And they always claim that this comes from Africa. It comes from the sailors that were there. Problem is, people say it comes from Africa because of the blacks come from Africa. Now, sailors, they had all different colors and everybody was in sailors, plain and simple. But so you have three distinct colonies that were seafaring and they all have fighting of that nature. What's
Hmm.
more interesting, and people might say, no, you're full of it, is that Salvador, Brazil, is where capoeira emerged, and
Mhm.
all the stories of capoeira, they learned it from the sailors, they learned it from the dockhands, and they say, well, the slaves brought it in. It's more the sailors and dockhands. I think chasson and this type of fighting was very common in ports around
Yeah,
in Mediterranean ports.
that's a really good theory. I bet you're right on that. I mean, I can see a lot of similarity with those kicks. I did
Mm-hmm.
capoeira back in college a little bit, and we did a lot of kind of inverted stuff on our hands.
Yep.
Okay, let's go take a look at this guy. What is he doing here?
That's the salute of Savate. The salute of Savate is right over your heart and it opens up. And there's an old sayings in there. I respect everything unseen and unseen. And basically, it was as you grow in the art. Something sometimes as you're training, you might see your professor, your instructor do something and say, man, what did he do? And then later on in time, you say, that's what he did. Because you have more time into it, you realize what what had happened or what had occurred. So that's
Okay,
something that very much that's a salute of Savat.
that's really cool.
When you have that type of configurement with a headgear
Uh-huh.
and with what they're doing there, that type of competition is known as pre-combat, pre-combat,
Okay.
like our amateur boxing.
Mm.
When you have them without the helmets, it's known as combat,
Okay.
combat. Okay,
So looking at this
that's
picture here, looks like this girl is front kicking her in the groin. Are front kicks to the groin allowed, or is this a stray shot?
no, that's not a kick to the groin. What's going on is she probably kicked the front leg, and the girl is probably in a she might be the other girl might be a southpaw or might be kicking with the front leg, and she just kicked underneath to the supporting leg.
Okay, but groin shots aren't allowed. I know it is in some disciplines. Okay,
Groin not allowed because you want that that gentleman's.
sure. Yeah, I don't want to get into that kind of competition either. So no offense there. Um, going way too fast there. What about this? This is cool. This actually reminds me a little bit of point sparring, just the way he's throwing a back fist and he's blocking that lead roundhouse kick.
Well, that was the old jabs. Remember, I told you when they were teaching for the Koshi, they used to jab that way and
Yeah,
punch that way. And it's and that right there, that parrot that he's doing is no longer used because the kicks and the momentums now are a lot harder to do that. And if you get that type of block locked in, well, guess what's going to go? Your forearm. But that is a great picture. That's actually a classic picture. That's in '98, so 1898. That's Box Frances right there.
yeah, you can see it down there in the corner. It says La Boxe Française. That's cool.
That's a
Um,
post, very famous.
I think there's one more here that shows some techniques. Let's see if I can find it. This just looks like another picture of him with his shoes on sparring. Okay, this is the one I was looking for. So, lot going on here. Any of these moves want to talk about? I find this one over here, where he's
Which,
basically like checking his leg with his foot. That's really cool.
oh yeah, but
A couple of them like that.
remember, you kick to the legs in Savant.
Hmm.
So a lot of people don't understand that if you're kicking at me, I can kick your kicking leg. I can block it. I can stop it. That's what he's doing. A lot of these kicks that he's doing, they're known as stop hits. Okay,
Hmm.
they're not really checks. They're more blocks.
Yeah,
And where do you hit from? Which is came from Box Frances Savat, the stop kick, very very Box Frances oriented. And guess where it merged into? Bruce Lee took it, and all of a sudden now you have stop hits and Jeet Kune Do, right?
yeah,
So why? Because Bruce Lee studied Savat out of books. People keep saying that some about him, but yeah, okay. But you see, on the third one from the top, he's
uh-huh,
kicking the leg. That's actually a legitimate kick. That's a chasse lateral. Chasse means like a piston, but lateral means sideways. It looks like a side kick, but actually what you're doing is you're kicking above the knee.
Uh-huh.
None of the kick, none of the kicks in Savate are going to be towards your knee. Okay. A lot of people say, "Oh, I'm going to just kick your kneecap." Yeah, good luck. Number one. Second, have you ever shot a rabbit that's running?
Shot a rabbit?
That's running.
No.
Okay, it's very hard, right?
I bet, yeah.
Yeah. So imagine if you're fighting and adrenaline's going and you're moving around. For people to say, "I'm just going to turn around. I'm just going to kick your kneecap." Ain't going to happen. So a lot of the kicks are either done to the thigh where you get your Charlie horse
Mhm.
at the interior exterior because that's a bigger target. If
Sure.
you try to hit somebody in the knee while they're moving, they're walking, it's very, very hard. Now
Hmm.
you can hyperextend the knee because I hit you above it,
Yep.
right? And then hyperextend. But that's where you see they're either kicking the lower part of the leg or the thigh area of the leg, either kicking you in the tibia or above. Then you have some wrestling kind of thing inside with elbows. That's lutte parisienne.
Okay, I see what you mean there. The Degager. I
I on
can't read this
now
stuff, but
that
um,
those pictures there that you have, that's a very old. It comes from a manual.
okay.
Okay, so everybody kind of uses that as reference.
I love these kind of like old stick figures. I was always inspired by the Daoji Kondo and all the little drawings that he drew. I actually have a handbook that I give out to my students, and I do similar drawings. And I've had parents come up and say, I can't really understand how to do my form or whatever from these drawings. And it's not really for that. It's more of a reference. And I think there's something kind of almost spiritual about looking at cool little pictures like this. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah. Anyway, so that's what I have for pictures. And I think we are getting really close to our time here. Let me close this down here. Stop share. But it's been great having you back on. I feel like we got to go even deeper with Savat. The stuff you were talking about the origin story and all the different lineages coming together is really fascinating. And it's great to meet you and have you on the show so you can share some of that with our viewers because I am a big believer that every martial art has something amazing to teach us, and I want to make sure that these, disciplines are preserved. And I think you're doing amazing work out there in Laredo, Texas. If you guys are in the area, you should definitely stop by and give it a try. And one more time, you said you have a competition coming up or like a festival?
Right. No, it's more like a festival. It's actually a Hall of Fame. It's a World Pugilist Hall of Fame that's under the auspice of USA Savant, and it'll be on November 8th and 9th.
Okay.
Okay. We have several other movements here, and we have Laredo, of course, the first school of Savate here in the States, which is recognized by both the French Federation, International Federation, as a school, the first school of Savate. People say, no, but we had a club. A club and a school are totally two different entities.
Mm-hmm.
But we have some movement. We have a Savate movement in San Antonio, in Seguin. Now we're starting one. We have one in Austin. We're trying to start one in Killeen area again, and we of course we have two clubs in the Dallas Fort Worth area, and of course the Chicago elements, and some other little movements that we have, but
Sure.
they're just small movements. They're not big schools, but anytime you like, we'll help spread the art. If you guys want to one day have a workshop, we'll be
Yeah,
more than go over
absolutely.
there and work out and just it's all about learning,
Mm-hmm.
and it's all about spreading. In the something that's true in the 50s when Savat was very low and it was picking up. The French martial artists that were involved in judo were the ones that kept Savat alive.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because all the people in judo ended up going with Lafont and learning Savat, and that's how they started. And in fact, it was at one in the 50s. It was a World Judo Savat Federation. So there's
Mm.
a lot of mingling back and forth there. and up to the 60s, somewhere along the 60s, it kind of split up. The French became the National Savate Association again because a lot of people started growing. Okay, so a lot of people do not know that those connections. I tell this to people: train a martial art that you're happy with, train a martial art that you want to grow with, but never belittle the other arts, because what occurs is you might learn later on and say, you know what, I like what they did, I like what they do, you know, and always keep that in mind, because there's a lot of
Yes,
there's a
sir.
lot of within all the different fighting systems. And we also, as instructors, you as well, we have to teach and we have to practice for what we want to use it for. It's a huge spectrum in the martial art.
Well, I think it's
So I
really
want to
exactly what you're saying there, keeping an open mind to all martial arts. I mean, look at Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee started in Kung Fu, and then he led to Savate because there were things there for him to learn, and I think it's true with any discipline.
absolutely, absolutely, learn, and I in Savat, I've been doing it, and I do Kempo as well. I've done other martial arts. I
Sure.
continue, and I'll study an art, and I'll keep it there, but it's never mishmash into what I teach. It just I don't do that. I keep it separate
Yeah,
as teaching advice, and that's just the way it should be. You have different sciences, and this is one of them.
sure.
I want to thank you for us for you to hear a little bit of what Savat is,
Yeah,
and I want to thank your audience, and you guys stay safe.
thank you so
Keep
much. Yes, sir. Thank you for coming on. Until next time, let's keep training hard, guys.
Be safe.
If you enjoyed that podcast, please consider liking and subscribing to our YouTube channel, as well as hitting the notification bell. We offer in-person, group, and private lessons at our facility in Kyle, Texas, as well as virtual lessons anywhere in the world. If you'd like to learn more about our programs, you can find us online at risingphoenixtkd.com.